This week we're going to talk about some examples of traumatic events on Mental Health Minute with Ken. Last week I laid the groundwork for this series on trauma by talking about what trauma is, and it's an overwhelming emotional and psychological response to an event, and the event may or may not include physical danger. For example, one that may not include physical danger is bullying. That can be an emotional kind of abuse and can cause trauma for the person being bullied. Other examples of traumatic experiences or events include witnessing some kind of traumatic event, like being in the middle of a war, witnessing a shooting or some other kind of crime, or somebody else being abused. It can include physical, psychological, sexual, and emotional abuse. It can be actually being in a war, like being a soldier. Some come back with PTSD, which of course is post-traumatic stress disorder because they've experienced traumatic events while they were fighting in a war. Natural disasters and terrorism are also other events that can cause some kind of trauma. Having a life-threatening illness or even chronic illness can be traumatic. Losing a loved one or other person close to you, including a pet, can be a traumatic experience. So there are all kinds of experiences or events that can cause trauma, and it just depends on the person and how their brain reacts to that. There's another kind of trauma as well, and it's called vicarious trauma. You may have heard the phrase living vicariously through somebody else, and what that means is that when people tell you about the fun things they do or their adventures or just really good parts of their life story, you use your imagination to put yourself in their place, and you experience it as well in your imagination. Vicarious trauma then is listening to other people's narrative about their own trauma and becoming traumatized yourself. And this can happen with anyone, and it can be a really big thing that happens with helper people like therapists as well, which is why it's important that all of us, whether you're a therapist or not, have a really good self-care plan to take care of our physical, emotional, and psychological health. That's it for this week. Next week we're going to talk about the trauma brain. I'll see you then.